bespoke radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening, Fade to Black. How you doing? Today is Tuesday. No, it's Wednesday. It's Wednesday, October 2nd. Yeah. I know what you were thinking. What? Yeah, we all do that. Today's Wednesday, October 2nd, 2024. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Let's do this, man. What an amazing week. This week on Fade to Black Monday, we had Toke Thompson on with us talking about post-human folklore. Last night, Kevin Randall with us to a full evening of UFOs. Tonight, Richard Spence is with us. We're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, secret societies in America. We're going to do that. It's all on the table tonight. And then tomorrow night, Rick Luskowitz is with us. We're going to be talking about the mystery of life energy. And here's the deal. I talked to Michelle about this today. Here's the deal. This week, I've got 4 professors and 2 PhDs on the show. You know, the pressure is on. I'm just a dude. How can I hang with the big brains? And I love that because if I'm learning, so are you. So let's get our learn on tonight. Richard Spence is with us. I want to let everybody know I've got 3 major events coming up. The links for everything are below. This is covering the next few months. Next month, November, I will be in Peru and Bolivia with Brian Forrester. Then coming up February 7th through the 10th, 2025, I am hosting the Conscious Life Expo right here in Los Angeles. It is the biggest conference in the world. It's ginormous, and I have been hosting it for almost 10 years. And circle that on your calendar. Come out and hang out with us. It is amazing. It's at the Hilton Hotel at the LAX airport. Then coming up right after that in March 29th and 30th, 2025 in Sedona, Arizona, the Rise of the Guardians. That conference, I am going to do little hosting duties. That's what everybody wants me there for. But this time around, I get to give a presentation. Doesn't happen often. Everybody just wants me to get up there and be a goofball and introduce people and host panels and all of that. I get it. But, I have stuff to say too. I've learned a few things. So come on out to Sedona, Arizona in March 2025 for Rise of the Guardians. I've got links for everything below. I want to start off the show tonight before I bring Richard in and share this with you. Today, I didn't take one. I took 2 rides on my Harley today, and I did that for a good reason because I went out this morning at about 8:30, and it was just one of those things. The temperature was right. There was no wind. And I think that affects like things like your vision and your sense of smell and kind of just the bike. Everything was perfect. And I rode around thinking to myself in my deep meditation, who is running the world? Right now I'm on my Harley in the desert. Who's really running the world? Richard Spence is on the show tonight. And I got home and I went, that was a perfect ride. I was in my head. I was thinking about the show tonight and what I wanted to do with it. It was just a perfect ride. So anyway, come in, I do the news, I do this, do that, get some writing done and everything. And I wrap things up. I went, man, it was so perfect this morning. I wonder if I can match that. So I went back out on the Harley And this time I went out around Skunk Works and went out. I headed east. Same thing. Who is running the world? I'm rolling by Skunk Works and Northrop Grumman. I make a right. I go by NASA, right? Air Force Plant 42. The FAA has got a huge secret installation out there, all this top secret. Who is running the world? Tonight is going to be the show. And that was my day. So excited about this. Tonight, Richard Spence will explore how conspiracies and secret societies are as American as apple pie. That's right. We're going to dive into all of the hidden history, covert organizations, and shadowy power structures that have shaped American society. We're going to do all of that and more. He's the author of many books, and the links for everything are below. He also, as a professor, taught at the college level. What we are about to discuss tonight. We're going to get to all of that and much more. I want to welcome for the first time to Fade to Black. Do I say professor? Do I go there? Do I say Professor Richard Spence?
You know, you can just call me Rick. That's fine. I'm perfectly happy with that. We've already established I'm a professor, so we don't have to keep repeating that, do we?
Yeah. Rick, before we get started, I've got to give you the first time guest disclaimer. Okay, so let's get that out of the way. But before I get to the first time guest disclaimer, you look like a professor. You've got the image, man. You've got that. Okay, let's get the first time guest disclaimer out of the way, which is this. Rick, it's just you and I sitting on my couch having a conversation as friends. And where that conversation starts, it starts. Where it ends, but we're going to end as friends. There you go, but you have to accept so we can move forward.
Okay. No problem.
Accept? No problem is accept?
It's accept.
See, you're already outsmarting me.
No. You know, he was going to say, I was going to get my hair cut today, and I didn't. So I saved the Unabomber look.
Yeah. You've got that going on.
My wife says it looks more like Papa Smurf, which is kind of disappointing. But anyway, there we go.
It is a professor vibe for sure.
I guess. Yeah.
Rick, do me a favor and let me get you to scoot up closer to your computer and your microphone. And
there we are.
And much better. Okay. So, in teaching something like this, do you find that everybody has an interest in this subject? That this is, you have all the TV shows, all the movies, all the radio programming and the documentaries. People are drawn to this. And when you teach it, do you find that that's the same thing? People want these answers, don't they?
Well, the class that I taught at the University of Idaho for, I don't know, well more than a decade. I mean, I taught it long enough that I've forgotten how long I taught it. Was called Conspiracies and Secret Societies in History. Okay, so again, it wasn't a course about conspiracy theories. I tried to make it more one about, there's no shortage of actual conspiracies, well-documented conspiracies. So you don't really have to deal with the theoretical part of it, but I combine both of those. I mean, here are things that we know. All right, let's take an example. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln was a political conspiracy. Numerous people involved. Maybe that is one of the things I like to do is to define things. So when I'm talking about a conspiracy, what do I mean by a conspiracy? Because you got to have a definition. Other people may have other ones, but this one is mine. A conspiracy is, in my definition, two or more people working together in secret to attain a common end.
Ooh, different than the Webster Oxford Dictionary. I like that. I like that definition, which in the classical definition, I'm going to paraphrase, but it's something like two or more people working together to commit a crime.
A crime or an unlawful, but there's no reason it has to be.
Right. I like your take on it. Right. Yeah. So well, isn't it? It's okay. I just interrupted you for the first time. No. I apologize for that. But isn't it interesting how pop culture has taken conspiracy and conspiracy theory in a whole other direction and apply it to just about anything that is just maybe just sensational. Oh, that's a conspiracy. It doesn't fall into any definition like yours. It's just it's just a conspiracy, and they don't understand the word that they're using.
Well, that's often the case. But that's one of the things that people can do. If someone says this is a conspiracy or this isn't a conspiracy, you got your checklist. You got to have more than one person. One person cannot conspire. Okay. So you have to have two or more people working together. They don't necessarily have to be friends or allies. They just have to be working together to achieve a common end or goal. But the other point is that they're doing this in secret. So what tends to make conspiracy, the word means, the Latin root is to breathe together, which I think is a kind of interesting way of thinking about it.
Really?
To breathe together. And you're doing this in secret, so it's compartmentalized. Conspiracies keep most people out of it, and they are by nature small. I mean, let me give an example of what I'd say is certainly a non-criminal conspiracy. Have you, and I'm talking to you, Jimmy, or anybody else, at any point in time decided you were going to do something with some friends, you were going to get together, there was some sort of activity you were going to go on, and somebody said something like, well, do we have to bring Bob? You know, Bob's always a problem with these things. Can't we just not tell him about it? And so you all decided that you weren't going to tell Bob. So there you have two or more people working together in secret to attain a common end, which is to keep Bob out of it. Now, that's certainly the low end of the speed spectrum of conspiracies, but that's what it is, and it shows you how often even sort of unrecognizable a conspiracy can be.
I'm laughing. I can't be specific here because I don't want to. I got to keep my cards close to my vest and my chest. But I recently put a party together. Okay. And there were some people at the party that were very special to me. And anyway, we've got one friend in the circle. It's been part of the group for a very long time, but we just didn't want him to ruin a good evening. Okay. And I'm going to leave that right there, but we did. So we kept it off of Facebook. No pictures were posted, nothing beforehand, everything. And we all discussed it and we were all cool with it. We conspired. We did. That's exactly what we did. We did. And we were fine with it. Nobody carried any guilt.
It was necessary. It was one of those. It was for Bob's best interests.
You know what? And the party was amazing.
Good.
It was amazing.
Good.
It was perfect. It was perfect. But yeah, isn't that interesting though? And so this is kind of like a square can be a rectangle. Rectangle can't be a square. Do you need a conspiracy, a goal for a secret society? Does that apply?
Well, I guess what's the whole point in keeping things secret? I mean, don't you want to advertise? If you have something really cool, don't you want to advertise it? And one of the things about secret societies, we might get more into this, is that for the most part, they're not really secret in the fact that people don't know about them. So let me again give an obvious example, maybe the most obvious example you can find in American society: Freemasonry.
Right.
And Freemasons don't hide their existence. They advertise their existence. You go into any town that has a Masonic lodge, and as you go into the town somewhere, there's a sign that tells you that there's a lodge in town. Usually if you find the lodge, there's a sign on it that tells you this is a Masonic lodge. So it's one of the things that many Masons like to say is that we're not a secret society, we're a society with secrets. Or I saw another sign recently that said, Freemasons, secret society, not so much. In other words, not that we're not, but maybe not as much as you think we are. But what you've got here is that it's not the existence of the group which is hidden. What is hidden, what's secret, is what the group does. So one of the main things that happens to you as you're initiated into the different levels of Freemasonry is that you go through rituals of initiation in which you are repeatedly sworn to secrecy, and you take oaths of secrecy that pledge all the horrible things that will happen to you if you divulge the secret of the Brotherhood. Now, here's a kind of interesting thing. One of the things you can do now in the age of the internet is that if you want to, with very little trouble, you can go out and you can find out the details about Masonic rituals. Okay, you want to know what a Master Mason has to go through to become a Master Mason? Well, you can find that. It's out there on the web. And really, as long as I think Freemasonry has existed, there have been people who have betrayed those secrets. I mean, why do you think they're making you swear over and over again that you won't betray the secrets? That's because people do. And the real effort here is to try to intimidate, to make someone feel obligated and somewhat intimidated about not betraying those. So I asked a friend of mine who was a Freemason. And by the way, full disclosure, I am not. But he was a Freemason. I have friends who are. And I said, look, I know what goes on here, and it's easy enough to find out. So what's with all the oaths of secrecy? And his view, and this is only his, remember, he and no one else speaks for Freemasonry, but his view was that, look, the oaths are certainly kind of over the top. And in his view, again, nobody's actually going to do these things to anybody who betrays the secrets because, well, that would be murder. But the other thing he said is that what the oaths are is that they're a test of the initiate's reliability and their personal honor. So what you've done, it's like anything else. You take an oath and you are expected to obey that oath. And if you don't, well, what have you demonstrated? That essentially you're a faithless person.
You can't be trusted.
It's a test of character. And so the idea is that, you were brought in as a member, you were embraced by the order, you were offered initiation, you swore those oaths in good faith. Whether or not you thought any of these terrible things would happen to you, you swore the oaths in good faith, and therefore, if you betray them, that's on you. We just made a bad choice. And I think that for most people, that's the explanation as to why those oaths are there. It's a test of character. But still, these things are supposed to be secret. What goes on, what is discussed within a lodge meeting, and this is true for most so-called secret societies. Their existence is not the mystery. The mystery is what goes on within the order, and well, you can also come down. You can look through a detailed of a Masonic ceremony. You can find all the steps that go through. And even if you've looked at every step of it, if you've read the description of the ceremony, the question still might be, what on earth are these people doing? I mean, why? What's with the coffins and the skeletons and the tow ropes? And okay, why all of this? Why all of this? What do these things mean? And that, keep in mind, I think, is a big question about everything. It's the question that we tend to ask. We often witness something happening. Something happens in our life. And the most important question isn't what happened, it's what does it mean? What's the significance of this thing which has taken place? And so you still have that fundamental mystery. Even if you see the ritual performed in front of you, there's some part of it as an outsider that you must be missing because you don't know the esoteric meaning of what you're looking at. It's like there's the exoteric and esoteric. Exoteric is what's visible, what you see, what you can touch. Esoteric is the invisible, the intangible, the meaning which is hidden within what you see.
Well, I've often there's a little bit of a paradox, almost a conundrum here, where you have a lodge meeting. You have the Grand Master up there, and he says, "Okay, Tomorrow night, Tuesday, secret initiation. Wednesday morning, pancake breakfast. Right? And it's like you have you know what I mean? You have this visible thing, this public thing, and then you have this secret thing that's going on. And the other part of, for me, which is number 3 with that, because you have the public side of Freemasonry, where they are out there, and then the private side. And then when you talk to, and I've got many friends, and now I'm not a Freemason. I've not been inside of a Freemason lodge. Well, not voluntarily, I should say. But it's you are learning. They are in possession of the stuff. And the longer that you stay with it and stay committed and climb and get your degrees, the more stuff is exposed to you. And that's the part that it's not the initiation. It's what is it that they know? Because they've been around for a long time. They've been around forever.
Well, I think if you were to ask most American Masons, and it would probably be true for Masons anywhere, if you were to ask them, what is Freemasonry about? The basic answer you're going to get is about fellowship and self-improvement. It's about, one of the terms which is used is taking good men and turning them into better men. So there is this self-improvement. I'm not sure it's quite as simple as that, but you're not going to learn the secrets of the universe. Okay, you're not going to learn the secrets of life and death. No one at least explicitly promises you're going to get that. But what will you do? Well, you'll learn about yourself. It'll be a self-discovery. You'll learn about the values of cooperating with your brothers in common endeavors, and you will advance in some kind of personal and spiritual way. There is a certain spirituality to Freemasonry. There's not any specific God, but there is still the belief in some kind of, you can believe in any kind of higher being that you want. It's all covered in the term great architect of the universe, because whatever we may think about God, as it was put to me once, we can all agree that if you believe in God, you believe God created the universe. Now, you can then give God different names. Doesn't really matter, so long as you have that basic idea. Now, that, by the way, is true for most of Freemasonry. It's not true for all. There have been Masonic orders and there are Masonic lodges, past and present, who require a specific oath of allegiance to Christianity, to Trinitarianism, or it could be to Islam, it could be to something else. But that's something that a particular group of Freemasons do. It's not something which is intrinsic to Freemasonry itself, because maybe this is the important lead, is that there's no trademark to it. No one.
Can you be an atheist Freemason?
There are people who have been, but if the requirement of your particular lodge is that you have to express a belief in a superior being, then
Right.
Being an atheist would be a problem, and you probably wouldn't get invited to join. That's the other thing about Masonry or any secret. One of the definitions of a secret society is that it's by invitation only. You can't walk in and go, I want to be a member, and they have to let you. No, this is a private organization. And not only do they have to invite you to be a member, usually you would be invited by someone who is already a member, but traditionally, and again, there are variations on this, everybody within the lodge has to agree to admit a new member. If anybody, the tradition was a thing called blackballing. You ever heard that term before? Someone was blackballed?
Right.
Well, what it was is that if you're going to consider a new member, this was used in other places as well. You would have a white marble and a black marble, and you would pass a can around, and everyone would put a marble in the can. And white marble meant the person was accepted. If there was one black marble in the can, then someone, you don't know who, but someone had decided this person wasn't fit to join, and that was it. Maybe they can be reconsidered later. but it would have to be a unanimous agreement to bring this person into our particular brotherhood. So you have been invited, you have been vetted to a certain degree. I mean, generally they're going to know something about you before you're there. Strangers would not be. First of all, you're going to have some brother who's going to vouch for that this would be a good person we can bring in. So you've got to be invited. You generally then go through initiations, you swear oaths of loyalty, but also you're offered something. I mean, what do you get out of this? Why are you joining? Well, maybe you just want to have friends, fellowship. This is the Freemasonry is all about fellowship. It's getting together with the boys, and this isn't all boys organization, although there are exceptions to that too. And you're going to get together with the boys, you're going to learn about yourself. It can be turned. I've heard descriptions of Freemasonry that sound like grown-up Boy Scouts. Okay, we're all going to get together and we're going to do these things. But because it isn't a specific thing, because Freemasonry was never owned by anyone, no one holds the trademark to it. There is no specific absolute kind. There are variations on that theme. So basically, anytime you're told, well, Masons never do this or they always do that, I guarantee you at some place and at some time, there were people who called themselves Freemasons who did that or didn't do that or did it differently. So there are many Masonic organizations, there are many higher lodges, there are higher rights to those, but no one owns the name. Which means that if you and I decided we wanted to form our own form of, we wanted to call something a Masonic lodge or a Masonic society, we could do it and no one could stop us. We couldn't say we were part of any of the existing Masonic Grand Lodges, but we could essentially form our own, and all the other ones would simply, go that they aren't real. By the way, if you're Freemasons who don't like other people who claim to be Freemasons, call them irregular. Okay, an irregular lodge is one that most of the others wouldn't recognize, or that in some way they don't practice it the way that we do in that case. So here's the best way I ever heard it put. Freemasonry is a house of many rooms. It is a house, it is a structure, it's a thing, but within it are many rooms, and different things happen in those rooms, and those rooms are sometimes decorated differently. So never assume that it's all the same thing. So that, for instance, there's no great pope of Freemasonry. There's no grand poobah who runs this. There never has been.
See, you brought it that. Isn't that the grand poobah, that whole part of pop culture in the Flintstones?
Yeah. Okay.
That's right back at the Freemasons.
And well, yes, Fred and Barney remembers what the Order of Buffaloes. Okay,
yeah,
that was Jackie Gleason. Whatever they were a member of, yes, that was a lampoon of Freemasonry.
It certainly was, and so if we go back throughout history, it seems like not all, but a lot of the very important figures, and it doesn't matter if it's the arts, entertainment, politics, science, right? Freemasons, like everybody was a Freemason, and society puts that label on it. Oh, Buzz Aldrin was a Freemason. Oh, George Washington, Da Vinci, whatever. It's just like people want to put that label on it. Why did that stigma start? Is it because it's kind of secret, or is there something else going on?
Well, let's face it again. It's not really secret, or you wouldn't know about it. You wouldn't be able to dislike it and resent it if it was secret. But what people generally resent about it, basically, is that it excludes them. All right, so here's this particular, remember, you have to be invited. I should also add that generally speaking, in most places and times, certainly in the US, Freemasonry had a class element to it. It still does. Okay, that's one of the things that in American society we don't want to talk about because we all pretend we're a classless society, but we're not. And by this, in order to be a Freemason, it required a certain amount of money. Because you had to buy the regalia and other. They don't give this stuff to you. You have to pay. So there was a certain price of membership. It's like being a member of a country club. There's a price, and the price is high. Why? To keep out the riffraff, to essentially ensure that poor people can't be members. That's what it comes down to. The one thing that you would rarely find if you went back to colonial America, and probably still the case, is that you're not going to find, traditionally, you wouldn't find a lot of dirt farmers or working men. They weren't invited to join. They generally didn't have the financial resources to join. Who would become a brother? That was generally someone who was in the professions or in business.
Okay, so and when we look at Washington, D.C., and a lot has been made of that. There's plenty of information out there, the designing of it. Mm-hmm. And you look at the stonework, the mason work, right, of Washington, D.C., which is everywhere. Most would point to the Freemasons having a hand in all of that. And then that would in turn suggest a Freemason influence on not only the founding fathers, but the very fabric of the United States from the very beginning.
I was at, decade or so ago, I was at a naval officer, an ROTC commissioning ceremony. No big deal, but you have an ROTC thing on campus, and some of my students were part of that, and I got invited to it, and it was a general commissioning of officers, and there was a fellow from the local Scottish Rite Freemasons. I didn't know there were local Scottish Rite Freemasons, but he was very pretty. He was a Freemason, and he specifically noted he was a member of the Scottish Rite, and we'll explain later what the rites are. That's a kind of a thing apart from it. A fancy Freemason. And he gave this talk, and in this talk, he specifically said, and remember, I was listening to him, he's going, this is a Masonic republic founded on Masonic principles by Freemasons. This is now and always has been a Masonic republic. Now, I got to keep in mind, there's no Masonic Bible that claims that anywhere, but here was a fellow who believed that to be true. And that isn't exceptional. You would find many like him and with Freemasonry who would hold exactly the same ideas. Now, it so happened I knew that there was another guy at that ceremony who was also a Freemason, not a Scottish Rite Freemason, but a Freemason. So I asked him later, I said, well, what do you think he just said? Would you agree with that? Is this a Masonic republic? And this guy's opinion was, shows you the different opinions within Freemasonry, is that he goes, well, I've heard that before. I don't really know that that's true. I don't personally think that that's true, but I guess if he thinks it is, he can go ahead and say that. So in other words, you have two Freemasons who didn't exactly agree upon it. The other guy wasn't saying the guy was wrong. He's just saying that wouldn't be necessarily my view of it. So here again, beware of assuming that all Freemasons believe exactly the same thing. But it's a popular notion. It was a popular idea, and the reason why, excuse me, my nose is itching here. The reason why it's a popular notion is that if you go back and look at the American revolutions, one of the things that you will find in great abundance are Freemasons. You will also find in greater abundance people who weren't Freemasons. I mean, rare. You'll hear this sometimes. Everybody who signed the Declaration of Independence, or everybody who did this, or everybody who did that was a Freeman. No, you can go through and you can count them up, and that's not true. But there's a lot of them. And there are more than you would assume in a normal distribution of the population. So here's what I mean. At the time of the American Revolution, the population of the rebellious colonies was around 3 million.
Oh, is it that high?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I didn't think it was that big.
About 3 million people.
Okay.
Now, you got to keep in mind a certain proportion of those, 20% or so, are slaves, and half of them, all of them, are women. And remember, those are people who are completely out of contention for that. And so you're basically coming down to the number of, and normally you would have to be 21. So you're essentially talking about 21-year-old white males. That's what we're talking about. Those were all the people. But even then, there are hundreds of thousands of those people. But how many Freemasons were there in revolutionary America? Well, no one's entirely sure, but the numbers range between 2,000 and 6,000. So let's just argue that there were around 5,000 Freemasons and George Washington is one of those. Hancock is one of those. Benjamin Franklin is one of them. Thomas Jefferson might have been one of them, but who is entirely sure? And that, again, is something to keep in mind. There's no official list of who's a member. Lodges keep, according to how good they are with records, a record of who has been a member.
Well, that's okay. So based on what you're saying, and I understand, it makes sense. But that is a way out of balance ratio, right?
Well,
I mean, that's in that. Okay, there wasn't that many Freemasons, but there was a lot of Freemasons that were running the country and writing the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, and again, the foundation, the very fabric of this country. It's a skewed number. It's a pretty big influence for such a small group.
Well, you can get a gradation because you don't know. I mean, there's no big book somewhere you can go to look up who was a Freemason. It just depends usually it depends on whether they acknowledged it, whether the person's lodge brothers acknowledged it. Often, if you want to find out whether someone was a Freemason, look at their obit. That's the most common place I've seen that mentioned. And there have been people I've looked in for one reason or another for purpose of historical research, and the only place that I ever found any clear reference to their Masonic allegiance was in their obituary. So if they were, that's usually where it will show up.
Now, what about the Knights Templar? Now, I have interviewed the worldwide Grand Master of the Knights Templar, Timothy Hogan. He's been on the show many times. I've had many Freemasons on the show, very high up in the order, very popular television personalities too, as well, to discuss many different facets of all of this. What has always really fascinated me was the Knights Templar side of it, not only because it's a branch off of Freemasonry, and I want your take on that, but also the age of the organization. I mean, it goes back. It's Friday the 13th, and most people don't even know what that connection is.
Well, okay, that's. I'm glad you brought that up because we were going to get into some point. So the connection between Freemasonry and the Knights Templar. So let's keep in mind, Freemasonry is real. It's a large organization, still got about 1 million members in the United States. Used to have 4 million back in 1959 when there were a lot fewer people. So yes, indeed, it has been a very influential organization. And there has been an idea which has been popular in Freemasonry since before the Americans, since the early 18th century. In fact, going back to the 1730s, you have claims that there is a link of some kind. The claim basically argues that Freemasonry in some way is the heir to the legacy of the Knights Templar. So let's go back. You know, there's always, you have to explain one thing before you explain something else. So who were the Knights Templar? Well, I mean, a lot of people would know. They were a monastic crusader order during the Crusades that basically existed between the 11th and the 14th centuries. So they're around, they were formally created around 1118, and we know they went out of business in 1308. It was kind of a phased in, but they're stripped of their power in 1308, and they're completely obliterated by 1314. So it was a real thing. The Knights Templar aren't something somebody made up. They were They were created as a kind of rich guys crusader order. They had to take monastic vows if you were at the top of the organization of chastity and poverty, which was often difficult for wealthy people to do, but their family had the rest of the money. And their goal initially was to protect Christian pilgrims on the way to Jerusalem. So they're formed after the Crusaders have taken Jerusalem and established rule over the Crusader states, what today would be, if you look at a map of the Middle East and you look where Israel is and Lebanon is, that those are almost exactly conformed to where the Crusader states were. And the Templars were special also in that they were founded as a monastic order that was answerable only to the Pope. So this was important. They weren't under the control of the Christian king of Jerusalem. He had no power over them. They weren't under the control of any king. The king of France or England had no power over them. They were answerable for what they did only to the Vatican. And that gave them a great deal of power and leeway. And so over the centuries that they existed, between 1118 and 1308, they fought in the Crusades, but most important thing they did was they built up this kind of financial and real estate empire. So one of the things that was very common in the Middle Ages is that since people were afraid of dying and going to hell, one of the things the Catholic Church provided you were all kinds of ways to make sure you didn't do that. That's why the sacraments are there. That's why last rites are there. And that's also why you can give money and land to the church, and that will all be, kept track in some sort of account book in heaven, and that will help you. Okay, there's no sin that you can commit, generally speaking, that in some way you can't be forgiven for, and there isn't some means of penance to doing that. So people would donate land and money to the church, but in doing so, they would donate land and money specifically, let's say, to the Templar Order. And so one of the things the Templar Order did was that at its peak, let's say in the 1200s, it controlled 9,000 separate properties throughout Europe and the Middle East, mostly in Europe. I mean, they owned land in Poland, they owned land in Denmark, they owned land in Spain and Portugal and Italy and France and England and Scotland and in the Middle East. So they owned a lot of real estate. The other thing they also controlled was money because they formed a banking system. And that allowed them to, here's basically how that worked. Let's say you wanted to go on crusade. And, that was, you're going to have to go by what? You're going to have to walk or go by a horse or on a boat. Anyway, it was going to be long and it was going to be difficult. And you're going to need money with you. Well, money at that time consisted largely of sacks full of coins. So do you really want to go off to the Holy Land carrying bags of gold and silver, which one, are heavy, and two, also make you a target for robbery?
You get robbed. So you check in your money at the beginning of the trip. They write you a receipt. You show up in Jerusalem. You show up, give them and they give you your money back.
Yeah, there's even a secret password that only the real person would know. Now, the church at that time argued that you could not charge interest on any sort of money but you can charge fees, just the same thing your bank does today. All right. Remember, they charge fees for their services. So the Templars, the brothers, have helped you get your wealth into Jerusalem, and there is a fee for that. And they collect the fee. Thank you very much. And those fees accumulated. They take the money they earn and they invest it in more real estate. So by the time you get to the 1300s, by which time the Crusades are pretty much over and the Templar Order has kind of served its purpose and is beginning to decline, there is the belief. Now, what the reality is, we're not sure, but there was a widespread belief that these guys are rolling it. They got a treasure. And this is the thing you always hear about, right? The Templar treasure. They put it on a ship and took it to Oak Island in Nova Scotia and buried it in a hole. They didn't. But anyway, That's one of the stories. So there has to be this Templar
Don't
treasure.
kill it for me. Don't kill it for me,
Don't kill it
Richard.
for. Okay, I won't do it. It could be there.
Don't. Tooth Fairy, Santa Claus. That stuff's off limits on this show.
Okay, all right.
Are we cool? Okay,
We're cool. Okay.
All right.
The Templar treasure could be there. Could. But anyway. So the idea that they had huge amounts of money. So here's basically what happened. They're victims of a conspiracy. What do I mean by that? Well, the order's in decline. They're not as fancy or as powerful as they used to be. They're still presumed to have a lot of money. And their main property and headquarters at that time is in France, which was a fairly big deal Christian kingdom at the time. The King of France in the early 1300s was a really nasty character by the name of Prince Philip the Fair. And he was not called that because he was fair in his dealings, but that he thought that he was good looking. And he basically had decided, the year before he goes after the Templars, he goes after the Jews in France. And he basically just robs them and kicks them out of the country. That's what he does. He repudiates all of his debts to Jewish money lenders, robs them, and expels them from the country. And he, the following year, does exactly the same thing to the Templars because he thinks they have money. Now, this is where the conspiracy comes in. Who's the only person, remember I said, who has any real power over the order? The Pope.
Right.
Now, it so happens at this time that Philip, being basically the rotten guy that he is, has taken the Pope captive. He's literally taken the Pope from Rome, moved him to a city inside France, and made him his puppet. This is a thing called the Avignon captivity, if you're into papal history. So the Pope is no longer independent. And so Philip leans on, I think it's Pope Clement V. I'm not sure about my Clements, but it's one of them. And he essentially strong arms the Pope into saying, look, these guys, I'm pretty sure, are up to some, they're involved in blasphemy and heresy. And therefore you should ban the order so that they can then be arrested and their wealth can be seized, and given to me, or maybe some given to you. So that's the conspiracy. The Pope, reluctantly, as it turns out, but nevertheless he goes along with it, in 1308, revokes the charter of the order, and it is done. But at the same time, you find later in a document, I think that was only discovered in around 1999, called the Chinon Parchment. It's basically a letter which the Pope wrote, in which he said he was never convinced that there was, that the Templars did weird things in sort of weird ways, but he did not think that they had committed blasphemy or heresy. He thought that they had irregular practices, but nothing that would actually legitimize them being persecuted as blasphemers or heretics. Now, that's what he personally thought about it. But on the other hand, he'd publicly gone along with this demolition of the order. And the gangster that Philip was, he simply moved in, orders the arrest of members of the order, has some
the execution, taking the land, right? Yeah. Taking the land. And so to condense this down really quickly before we get to the top of the hour. So what was left of the Knights Templar, if we let's go with the pop culture version of this. I've done so many interviews on this, but Knights Templar ends up in what's left of it in Scotland, hook up with the Freemasons, and that's where the originality of the joining of the two groups started. That's in a general sense. Yes.
Except that's not really what happens.
Okay, hold on. Okay. We'll circle back. We'll circle back. We'll circle back. Because
real story? Let's find out.
Yeah, well, no, I want it all. I want it all. So because this is ancient stuff. And Now, I look at Freemasons a little bit differently. So let me ask you about this. When you see the Egyptian symbology and the architecture and the art and everything else, that when Egypt, ancient Egypt is represented inside of Freemasons and the lodges and what have you, including our money. I think that the Freemasons go back that far. They go back to first and second millennia BC when these temples were constructed, and the order started there. The art of quarrying stone, of masonry, and the designing of these temples and pyramids and everything else started there, and that was the origins of Freemasonry. I don't think Freemasonry is something that is a modern thing, a 14th century thing. I don't look at it that way. I think it's much older.
I mean, it has roots. This is one of the problems with it, is that you can't really figure out exactly what the roots are. So within Masonry, you get different stories, and there are different versions. So there are Masonic legends, I'll call them that, because no one claims that you can prove them. There's a belief, some British Freemasons believe it all goes back to the 10th century and King Athelstan. Okay, somehow King Athelstan came up with the whole idea. The most popular connection you find is with King Solomon, okay? The ancient Hebrew king from like 1000 BC. So it's King Solomon, King Solomon's temple, the whole legend of Hiram Abiff, and the temple has a very, very important part. And hence, the Templars, who got their name from hanging around where the old temple used to be. But then there's others. There was another story that no, the original Freemason was Adam, who built the first ashlar, the first temple was in Eden. Well, that takes it back. Or no, it was the ancient Egypt has some kind of connection to it. But this is it. It's whatever version of that you want to have. There is no official story. There's no story of the origins of Freemasonry, and that I think there are all these different versions because nobody knows what the origin is. So there was a guy that there's a prominent American Freemason, and this is as good a time to bring him up as anywhere else, by the name of Albert Pike. Albert Pike's name shows up in all kinds of stuff, usually unjustifiably, but Albert Pike was indeed a prominent American, again, Scottish Rite Freemason, most active between the 1860s and the 1880s. And around 1870, he wrote a book, a kind of Bible for the Scottish Rite, it's called Morals and Dogma. I found a copy at a garage sale, which I mean,
I have a copy.
Yeah.
I you know what? I'm gonna be straight. I read it all the time. It's good reading.
It's really interesting stuff, but it's a description. Within the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, you've got roughly 30 more degrees that are added to the original 3 degrees in Freemasonry. So these are all extra sort of fancy degrees you can get. And what the book is that it's a description of the esoteric meaning of each one of those degrees. So often, I think you would agree that Albert Pike is speaking in a kind of slightly almost new agey gobbledygook when he's describing these things, and it's virtually impossible to figure out exactly what he's talking, because this means this means that. But he says something, I think, in that's very important, is that he's talking about the origins of Freemasonry, and he says at one point that the origins, I'm going to paraphrase here, lie in the ancient mysteries. And what he's talking about are the mystery cults of the kind of Greco-Roman period, these sort of private religions that people would have. And he describes it as something like this. He says that modern the Freemasonry, which has emerged in the modern day, is like, he says, a Renaissance palace built of the ruins of a Greek temple. So the Greek temple or the Roman temples were what the origin was. And that's all crumbled and fallen apart. But those pieces have been used to rebuild something else. And so it is the Renaissance palace that we call Freemasonry, but it is built with the stones of the ancient mysteries. And he actually goes further to say that it's just kind of an imperfect reflection of what these ancient mysteries, they must have known all kinds of cool stuff.
Alchemicals, and the Philosopher's Stone and Hermetic principles and everything else. Albert Pike, I'm not here to offend anybody or say anything. Obviously, a very, very, very smart guy. Very smart, very learned guy. But his ego got in the way.
Well, there's that. It's also like Jeffrey Epstein said, just because you have a high IQ doesn't mean you're a good person.
Yeah, well, I'm not going that far with, but Pike, when you read Morals and Dogma, and also there's recordings of him, you can go and listen to him speak. He's very, very. I have heard stories over the years that these long presentations that he would give, it wasn't scripted, right? This is improv off the top, and he never skipped a beat. He never said the word something that I overuse a lot. Albert Pike never went and no, that he was very fluid, but I think he was full of himself. You know what? I think a lot of philosophers are. I'm just going to go with that. I'm going to leave that there.
I think that would probably be the case. He's an interesting guy. Although he was born in Massachusetts, he ended up as a Confederate general. Right. So a Yankee who became a Confederate general.
At what age?
Not a terribly well. It's during the Civil War. So
he had to have been young. He died when?
He dies around 1890.
Albert, hold on for a second.
Check and see. I think he dies around 1890.
Yeah, 1891.
1891. Okay. And born what? 1830s.
Wow, he was a justice of this Arkansas Supreme Court.
Yes. Okay.
Oh, that's right. In exile. That's right. I remember that now.
He can be accounted as an early advocate of Native American rights.
Right.
He was trying to recruit tribes in Oklahoma, or what would become Oklahoma, to fight for the Confederacy. He had his issues, though, with Jefferson Davis. He did not end the Civil War in particularly good graces of anybody, although he would get a statue, which I think has since been removed, commemorating him in Judicial Square in Washington, D.C. Now, that's kind of odd for a Confederate general to have his own statue. And that was put up by whom? His brothers of the Scottish Rite, because that's what they were honoring him as. He was essentially being honored certainly not as a general. He wasn't being necessarily honored for his position in the judiciary. He was being honored as an outstanding American Freemason. He's also most notoriously argued to have been one of the founding members of the first Ku Klux Klan. And that's one of those things, I would add, for which no documentary evidence, which means there's no piece of paper that says that anywhere in an original form, but it has been widely claimed and is more likely to be true than not true, I think. See, how's that for splitting hairs?
Right. Oh, I know I said that he didn't say the word and I was referring to the people that heard him speak and the way that they talked about it over the years that I've read, that he was just one of the best orators out there. Is the way that he spoke and presented himself, and he was just a very influential guy. Now, I wanted to ask you this, and we're going to head to a break here in just a minute. I know that we bounced around here: Scottish Rite, Knights Templar, Freemasons. Talking about Albert Pike right now, but swinging over, because I want to set this up for the other subjects for when we return after the break. when we look at a group like Bohemian Grove and that get together, and by the way, one of my moderators says that one of his friends' band played at Bohemian Grove. I was just like, what was the band's name? He never gave that up.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I didn't know. Man, Huey Lewis in the News. I don't know. So anyway, what influence? How many? When we look at Bohemian Grove, how many are Skull and Bones and Freemasons and secret societies that are involved with an organization like that? Do you have any idea what that percentage would be?
I mean, how much is an overlapping membership?
Yeah.
The most I would say is that you would find overlapping, you would probably find proportionately more Freemasons as members of the Bohemian Club. That's an interesting point. Bohemian Grove isn't the organization. It's just the place they meet. The organization that owns Bohemian Grove is the Bohemian Club. So you're going to find a higher proportion of people who would be Freemasons, a higher proportion of people who might be members of the Council on Foreign Relations. You would find a much higher proportion of people who would be part of the Trilateral Commission, maybe even a Bilderberger or two, because you're talking about people within a certain group. Remember, this has to do, again, these groups are selective and they are often class-based or based on a certain criterion, which would appeal to a number of different organizations.
Let's take our break right here. Our guest tonight, Rick Spence. We're talking about secret societies in America. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get your alerts and access to over 2,000 videos. Click that subscribe button right now. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and get the Fade to Black official podcast. 2,000 episodes, all of them commercial free for just $2 a month. Watch Into the Vortex on Gaia TV. It's Fade to Black for the screen. Simple to do. Go to Gaia.com, search Jimmy Church, or click on the link below. Follow Fade to Black on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Get all of the show updates every single day. It's now called X, but who cares? How you doing? Jimmy Church here. Special announcement. Get your Fade to Black t-shirts. That's right. Help support the show. Help support everything that we do over here. We've got 2 t-shirts. We've got 2 ways to get them. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. Go Beckley Teppy. Go to jimmychurchradio.com and become a Fadernaut. Get a membership. That's right. Everything is commercial free. You have access to downloads, and you get to call yourself a Fadernaut. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back. Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church, River Moon Coffee. rivermoonwellness.com. The links are below. Get your best coffee in the world. Absolutely. The Fade to Black blend. The links are below. Our guest tonight, Rick Spence. We're talking about secret societies in America. And Rick, right before the break, you start to jump into this, I'm going to say the joining of like dark forces. Right, you brought up the Trilateral Commission, of course, the Bilderbergs, the Bohemian Club, and then everything else, Scottish Rite Freemasons and Knights Templar. We'll just get into the Illuminati here in just a second. But the question on everybody's mind is, who is really running things? Do you believe that it's possible that we go through an election year, new president goes into the White House, goes into the Oval Office, sits down, adjusts the desk blotter, puts his pens where he wants them or she, and then the phone rings and he picks it up and it's his boss? Do you think that that's something that is possible?
Well, the way that I would probably think of it, the scenario I would come up with is that the president comes in and a group of other people come in and they give him a briefing. Okay. Remember, this is the type, either he's told that aliens are real or he's told who's actually in charge. But I sort of imagine it would be happening that way. Well, Mr. President, you've been elected. So here's how things actually work. Okay. The lizard people in Antarctica run things, or it's whoever you would want to choose. Insert whatever sort of insidious conspiratorial cabal you want. It could be, you want to know what my dark suspicion is?
I do.
That was likely to be true.
Well, that was the question.
I don't think anybody is in control. And I'd argue that in some ways that is a much scarier idea because here's your choice. Somebody's in control. If it's not the Illuminati, or if it's not the lizard people, or if it's not something else, then, at least, if the devil's in control, at least somebody's in control. Somebody's in the cab driving the train, which is what you want to have. The other idea is that no one's in control. What you have are a lot of groups of people who, out of vanity to a certain degree, believe they are or believe they should be, and constantly scheme and conspire, plot and intrigue as if they were, but the reality is that they're not. They're all clawing at each other like crabs in a bucket, pulling themselves back in. That there's not one elite which is in control. There's not one Illuminati. There's 50 different or 100 different aspirant rival Illuminatis that all think they should be running the world, none of whom necessarily have a clear idea how to do it, but that train, which is running along the tracks of history, isn't being driven by anyone.
Okay, you're right. That is a scarier thought.
Yeah.
That is a scarier thought, but I think it's like Occam's razor, where it's very easy when you understand families and old money and institutions that have been around forever. And these are names that most people aren't even familiar with, that it have a great amount of influence on world events and state actors, and that have been around for 1,000 years, 800 years. That is something else that I think is a possibility of influence. Call that the Illuminati, call it what you will, but I think that has, because dictators, presidents, kings, queens, they all come and go. They come and go, but the establishment stays there. And I think that is the real control.
Well, you certainly hit on something. I mean, I just said that in my personal view that no one is driving the train, I would still think is the most likely possibility. But that doesn't rule out the other possibilities. If there's some particular group which is running the world, well, there could be. The next question is, what are you going to do about it? I mean, if they're already in control, if they've been running things for hundreds or thousands of years. If they've been running things that long, then they're going to keep on doing it. Because no one, I mean, that would be an entrenched power structure that would be extremely difficult to imagine how you would ever replace that. So if we're all being ruled by the Illuminati, I guess we should think the Illuminati. I don't know. I had a friend of mine who once said, "Well, if there's Illuminati, all I want to know is how can I join?" Okay, I mean, if all the advantage, if this is the way to the cool stuff, then again, the resentment here is over the fact that you didn't get invited. I mean, that's what we can't. That's the thing, to take things down to a lower level. I don't know. Were you in a fraternity?
Well, I was going there next.
Yeah.
So let's talk about let's
okay.
If we'll
back, we'll come back to that.
No, we're going to go straight there. If we go and think about, nothing is crazier than when you think a conspiracy is afoot, right? There's dickery afoot, and then suddenly it actually happens. That's the part where I don't want to go into some deep psychosis over this, right? But I do like to dip my foot in the pool. I just don't want to jump in. But then we have this strange case of when Obama and Hillary were on the campaign trail. And then the press corps on the plane behind Obama's plane, Obama spokesman comes on the plane and says, okay, he's not going to be in the next city. He's not. Well, where is he? Well, we can't talk about it. And it turns out he went and met with the Bilderbergs. And he goes in, has a meeting, comes out. Hillary goes in, meets with them, comes out. Hillary drops out of the race, and she becomes part of his administration. Now, you have to back up and go, was that an agreement that was arrived at, that this was negotiated, or were they told?
Were they dictated?
Yeah, were they dictated that this is how this is going to play out? We all saw it happen. The facts of the case are as I am presenting them right now. Mm-hmm. The question is, what went on in secret? What do you think actually happened?
Well, we don't know. That's the first thing you have to say. So, so because you don't know, you can't then go ahead to try to prove that something happened. So here's the possibilities. Possibilities always break down into three different ones. One possibility is that all these things happened, that their presence at Bilderberg and then their subsequent political decisions are completely unrelated. I mean, one just isn't connected to the other. Could be. The other is that, yes, whoever Bilderberg is, these people dictated the result. They were called in. Hillary was essentially told, you must drop out. This has been decided. And she took her marching orders.
She became Secretary of State, right?
Yeah. The third possibility is a kind of, it's not that it was immaterial to what happened. There was no order given, but perhaps there were suggestions or inducements offered. So it could have been simply that, we, whoever that might be, think that it would be best if you did it this way. Maybe it was explained why that would be the case. So you got those three possibilities. Bilderberg had nothing to do with it. It had everything to do with it, or it had something to do with it. Those are your three choices. There are no others. Pick the one that you like the best.
Is it possible, though? I mean,
any of those are possible.
No, I just mean the facts of the case. If we just look at it in a black and white sense, right? Obama's told this is what's going to happen. He has to make Hillary Secretary of State, part of his administration. He agrees to that. Then they pull in Hillary and say, okay, you're going to drop out of the race. Obama is going to win the election. You're going to be Secretary of State. That's what's going to happen. She says, fine, boom, done. And the next thing you know, she drops out of the race. That's, like I said, it's almost like Occam's razor. It's like the simplest version of the story seems like it's probably how it
fits.
went down.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't know. The simpler version of the story might be that, you could leave the Bilderbergers out of it. You could say that was all decided in a meeting in the DNC. All the advisors, all the gnomes who surround these political figures, because all of them are surrounded by an army of advisor gnomes telling them what to do, got together and decided this will be best for the Democratic Party. It's Hillary, you should step aside in this. We should all concentrate about this one candidate. I mean, that could explain it. The Bilderbergers could explain it. Something else might explain it. I mean, what we know, and this again, I think is one of the key things that it goes back to history. There's this concept that history is all somewhere in a big book. It's like the Encyclopedia Britannica. We know everything that happened. We don't. We know virtually nothing that happened. So what we do is we see these things happening in front of us. Oh, well, there's this whole political decision which has been made. Now, that we know, that's the fact of the situation. The fact is Hillary Clinton dropped out. The fact was the party rallied behind Obama. The fact was that he was elected. The fact is that she was paid off. I don't know. Is that the term? Given the consolation prize of Secretary of State. The unknown in this case is what it goes back to that question: what's the significance of these things? What does it mean that these things happened? So were there any orders? Did the orders come from here? Did the orders come from there? And we don't know. We can speculate. We can even believe, but we don't know. And we never will. I mean, that's just one of the things. It's never going to happen.
Right. And one of the things that I enjoy, I love a good conspiracy. I love going down the rabbit holes and stuff. But one of the things that gets caught up in documentaries and TV series, you were on America's Book of Secrets. You know exactly what I'm talking about. By the way, great series. I love that series. But anyway, when we look at that, you and I were talking earlier before the show, and I shared with you something that I've talked about a lot on the show, was this experience that I had when I was 10 years old listening to late night talk radio back in Indianapolis, when I heard this host and his guest talk about the Illuminati. And I hadn't heard of the Illuminati. I was 10. And the idea that was presented that night that I've never really shaken, because I thought it was pretty interesting, that the Illuminati go all the way back to Stone Age man, and they were the dominant tribe, and and because of that, they had the best of everything. The best men, the best women, the best children, the best food, the best technology. They had everything and they dominated everything around them. And that core tribe from the beginning is what is running the world today. They have continued to dominate everything. And that's a strange, but when people are asked about the Illuminati today, people back up off of it, right? They don't want to talk about it, or they say they don't know, or they don't know any names, or it's a strange, it's a taboo subject that nobody wants to get involved in. And that would suggest maybe that this idea that I heard back in 1973 in Indianapolis, there might be some truth to it. What do you think about that?
Well, you got to start out again by defining a term. So Illuminati is the plural of Illuminatus. So just one of them is an Illuminatus. But what does that actually mean? Well, like everything else, goes back to it means someone who is illuminated, someone who has seen the light. And that term, in the Roman times, in the history of early Christianity, a person who had been baptized was an Illuminatus, because they had seen the light. They had been admitted to this new knowledge. And so the term Illuminati has been thrown around. It's a Latin-based term. All it means is someone who has been enlightened. It doesn't actually name an organization. I think that's important. All it does is it just gives some idea that whoever belongs to this has been illuminated. So there have been lots of groups long before the 18th century rolled along. When an Illuminati appears, the one that most people talk about today, the Bavarian Illuminati. So there have been God knows how many different groups who would simply use that term for themselves because they consider themselves to be illuminated. So we talk about the Illuminati today. Again, there are certain things we know. We have some facts. And what are those facts? In Bavaria, in the city of Ingolstadt, on the 1st of May, 1776, a professor of canon law at the Catholic University of Ingolstadt, his name was Adam Weishaupt, created an order which was generally referred to as the Order of the Bavarian Illuminati. Now, that wasn't its initial name. Its initial name was the Order of Perfectibilists. And I don't know, maybe he thought it better that they simply called themselves the Illuminated Ones. But it's not really clear, to me anyway, as to whether Illuminati is the name of the order itself or is simply the term which is used to refer to its members. And one of the things that makes me think that is that Weishaupt himself, in one of his many edicts that he put out, he was a very wordy guy, said that it never let it be that our order should be known anywhere by its actual name. I don't think he's talking about Illuminati in that case. So, you know, the Illuminaten order, as it was generally referred to, the illuminated order, again, basically describes the condition of people in it, not necessarily the organization itself. So that I think is interesting. We don't know what this thing was really called. We know the term that its members used among themselves, but that may not have been the actual name of the organization. So what did Weishaupt want to do? Well, he thought he's like Albert Pike. He thought he was another smart guy. And what he wanted to do was to create a new world order, literally. He wanted to create a organization recruited from the right people, that is, a selective secret society that would then infiltrate other institutions and other societies, like Freemasonry, especially, that Freemasonry would be infiltrated and it would be turned to the purposes, without the knowledge of most people in it, to this illuminated order. And what did the illuminated order seek to do? In the long run, its goal, as Weishaupt put it, was to make men happy and free. But first, he said, we must make them good. So it has nothing to do with democracy. It has to do with the institution of a secret authoritarian order, really a secret totalitarian order that will take control of all institutions and will use that to social engineer a new social order that will abolish all existing forms of government, that will abolish all existing religions, and will replace them with a new enlightened order governed by an enlightened elite. This has nothing to do with empowering the masses. This has to do with engineering the masses in a way in which the illuminated elite believe is necessary, and that he believed would create a kind of perfect society.
And at this, there were so many things that were happening at the same time that eventually made its way over here to the United States. I'm talking about like Renegade Chateau and the Priory of Sion, and over here the Rosicrucians and the Illuminati and the connections of all of this. Again, I don't want to say allegedly, but certainly were secret societies that kept the institutions completely secret. And I just find that really interesting and compelling, and that it rolls through to today. I mean, can you join the Rosicrucians? Right? Aren't they like in San Francisco?
There's the American Rosicrucian Order that was founded in the 30s. I'm going to forget the guy's name now. Not Clymer. There were various groups that called themselves Rosicrucians, but the Rosicrucians that used to advertise in the back of comic books,
right?
If you send in $4, we'll send you the Secrets of the Universe, which is what they were offering to do. That's the American Rosicrucian order, which was it really was a kind of mass merchandising of esoterica. So, I mean, again, there's nobody that owns the rights to the name Rosicrucians. Nobody can even tell you what Rosicrucianism is.
Well, was it again, I'm going to say allegedly, was it originally a branch off of the Illuminati and the original Weisskopf order, the Bavarian Illuminati, and the Rosicrucians were from Europe and were a branch? I could be wrong, but again,
they're earlier. Okay, so the Bavarian Illuminati, whatever it was, we know when it came into being. It came into being on the 1st of May, 1776, and it was banned in Bavaria in 1784. So it's not around very long. It's just around for a few years, and then the Bavarian royal authorities found out, oh, there's some group that's plotting to end government as we know it, so they banned it. But they banned it repeatedly. So the Bavarian government banned the Illuminaten order, I think, 4 times. Now, what does that tell you if you have to ban something 4 times over a period of less than 10 years? Well, it means that your bannings aren't working. It means you haven't banned it at all. And they didn't. So Adam Weishaupt is never arrested. He just flees Bavaria and he goes next door to Gotha, where the prince is a member of the Illuminati. And this is something else to keep in mind. Who was recruited into the Bavarian Illuminati? Rich, powerful people. Dukes, barons, margraves, princes, archbishops, businessmen, people who, this is the weird thing about it, people who are already rich and powerful and influential. So how could you recruit someone who's already rich and powerful, someone who's a prince, into an organization that's going to essentially destroy his principality and replace it with someone else because you promised them something bigger? See,
here's another crazy part about this, which rolled right over here to America. There were so many monarchies, kings, lords that were in pursuit of magic, of hermeticism. There were a lot of people running around claiming to have these secrets and would sell them or become the chemist for the castle, if you will. And Rosicrucian, the Rose Cross, that goes all the way through to Golden Dawn, Aleister Crowley. Yep. And the roots of this go back to the early 1700s. And before that, Hermeticism and that secret stuff was all over the place, with its roots going back to ancient Egypt and Alexandria.
Yeah, it's the Rosicrucians, the Order of the Rose Cross, first crops up basically in the early 1600s.
Right.
So, 150 years before the Illuminati, the Bavarian Illuminati, come along. But the way that they crop up is that there are just these authorless books that are published. There's one which is the Fama Fraternitatis, which is sort of like the famous Brotherhood. There's a second work, and then the final one is the Chemical Marriage of Christian Rosenkreuz, who's supposedly the Christian Rose Cross in some way. which is his name, who's supposedly the founder of the order. And these works basically describe the societies. What they never actually define is what the doctrine of Rosicrucianism is. And one of the first ways they first appear is in Paris. Again, I think around 1610, 1615. And what happens is that in Paris, the story is that these placards just sort of appearing on walls in different parts of the city, saying like, basically saying, hi, we're the Rosicrucians. And we, if you want to know the secrets of the universe, or you've ever been interested in any sort of exceptional power, or you want more knowledge, who doesn't want that? Then we're looking for new members. On the other hand, they don't say, call this number, write to this address. It's just like, think about it. You know, beam some thoughts towards us, and we'll find you.
Pancake breakfast Thursday morning.
Yeah. Nothing is simple of that. So these placards show up. Now, there's interesting things. Despite the placards are said to have shown up, nobody can actually describe exactly what they look like, and no examples of them remain. So we're not even entirely sure whether these placards ever exist. I mean, I suspect something did, but we don't really know anything more about them. And the thing you never get in any of this is that, okay, Rosicrucianism is this, and it's that, and it's not this, and it's this other thing. No, it's just like, we're the group that knows all the cool stuff, all the secrets of the universe. And if you join us, or if we pick you to join us, if you are chosen, if you are among the lucky winners of our lottery, then all of this stuff will be made known to you, whatever it is. I mean, it's the ultimate kind of promise. It's the same sort of thing that there's going to be some big payoff in this, right? You're going to learn, if not the secrets of the universe or the secrets of life and death, you're going to learn something really important and cool that will make you a wiser or a better person. Does that ever happen? Well, you don't know. You'd have to be in the organization to find out. But that's the promise. There's cool stuff coming for you if you put up with all of this other stuff. Go through the silly rituals and the bizarre initiations, swear all of these oaths, and then the good stuff will come. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. I mean, the thing to consider is, like a lot of other things, maybe secret societies are mostly cons.
So to a point, there's always that. You're always going to have the grift come in with something like this, for sure. I don't know how much money different lords and kings and queens paid out to some alchemical wizard, right? They were, every court had one, right? Every court had one.
Anybody who says they can make gold, you would want to have someone on your payroll that could do that.
And then you have somebody like Isaac Newton, right, who was chasing this stuff down, and who was wrote all of the original great works on math and physics and gravity, religion, right? And he was an alchemist, right? That's what was going on around Europe back then.
Yeah, I mean, but there was no contradiction between those. And here's an interesting way it was put to me. Modern chemistry is alchemy without the magic.
That's right.
It's just purely utilitarian, but you're still doing the same things. And so alchemy is the magic of things. It's the magic of physical substances. And you manipulate those substances to turn them into other things. So it's never just, the idea of taking lead and turning it into gold, that's just an example to sort of catch your attention. But alchemy was about the manipulation of physical matter into other forms of matter. And that leads in all kinds of directions. I mean, that ultimately doesn't just lead to turning lead into gold. It leads to Los Alamos in 1945 and the explosion of the atomic bomb, taking physical matter and changing its form. That is alchemy. In fact, I'd argue that the single greatest act of alchemy that has ever been performed was the explosion of the atom bomb. because that actually transmuted something. And there are people who argue that that's exactly what it was. By the way, I'm not saying that Robert Oppenheimer was an alchemist who knew he was working in alchemy, but maybe you don't have to. Maybe these things find their own way. It's again this idea as to whether or not we as humans are really in charge of things, or are we just being sort of manipulated in some way.
How does Crowley end up playing into this? And he's such a, can I use the word enigma and not sound like I'm simplifying it, but I clearly do not understand who he was. You've got different images, man. You've got the song by Ozzy Osbourne, right? Mr. Crowley, right? Listen to that song. And then you've got these other versions of him throughout history, and I'm not sure which one is the right one. Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin, buys his house, right? On Loch Ness, because that's where Crowley tried to summon, right? And that's, how does Crowley play into this? And then, of course,
where does Aleister Crowley come into all of this? Well, Crowley he's undoubtedly the single most influential occultist of the 20th century. And just about anything that tends to have the term occult attached to it today, in some way, is connected to him. He knew a lot of people in different spheres. He was a lot of things. He was like any person. He wasn't just one thing. But here's what I think is maybe the first thing to understand about Crowley, is that he grew up in a well-to-do Christian fundamentalist family. That's what he was raised in. His family belonged to the Plymouth Brethren. They were part of what was called a nonconformist church in England. That is, they rejected the Church of England. And they were essentially, in many ways, very similar to what we would describe today as Pentecostals. They believed that only a certain elect were ever going to be chosen to go on to heaven. Everybody else was going to burn in hell, and they were part of that elect. His father was a lay minister. His father was basically, think of this like a Pentecostal pastor who went around preaching the gospel. So it's an interesting thing to figure. How does a kid who was raised in a Christian fundamentalist household then become an adolescent and an adult who completely rejects and opposes Christianity and seeks to form his own religion to replace it? Clearly, the parents didn't get the result they wanted with this. Although the interesting thing is that Crowley loved his father. He always admired his father. His father, and the reason for that, I think, is his father died when he was 11. But he didn't hate his father. He idolized him in some way. And he actually, I think, saw him as sort of, think of it this way, Crowley's father was a preacher of the gospel, and Crowley, in his own way, simply became the preacher of a different gospel. But he was very much following in his father's footsteps. His relation with his mother was, as those often are, more complicated. But, they still spoke to each other. There was still a connection between them. Crowley was just, I guess the way, he was rebellious. He was one of those kids who was not going to conform to what it was. The fact that he was an only child probably didn't help. Never does. And he then went on to receive his life was shaped by a series of what he believed were revelations. And you can call them paranormal experiences, you can call them religious experiences. It's basically the same thing. That he received what he thought was contact from powers or intelligences in some greater world who offered him this knowledge. And he thought sort of promised him that he was going to become a kind of new Jesus. But as he grows older, one of the things that you see, if you look closely at Crowley, is he never gives up on it, but he becomes more and more, I think, disappointed in the result, because none of that happens in his life.
What was the name of the ceremony that he tried to perfect? He built the room at his house in Loch Ness Fort, had certain dirt in the room. What was the name of that?
Well, what he was trying to do at Boliskin House, as I understand it, was that he was trying to summon a series of the 22 demons of hell, the 22.
Yeah, right.
He was trying to summon a series of demons that you have to encounter and deal with. You have to gain some sort of control over before you can eventually attain contact with your holy guardian angel, which is kind of your personal guiding spirit. But you have to work your way through all of these other ones first. So one of the theories is that, one of the stories is that when Crowley is doing this in the early 20th century, he knows his rules of conjuring to a certain degree, but he's not perfect at it. And therefore, in the process of repeatedly conjuring powerful demonic forces, it's one thing to bring them up, but the rule, do not call up that which you cannot put down. So that's the argument, or some would argue he was less perfect in. So one of the reasons why the house got this bad reputation later, which it may have had before, was because, there's a lot of messy spiritual residue left around this place. That his summonings were not done exactly right, and that therefore there was sort of, for lack of a better term, there was bad juju that was attached to it.
Yeah,
and that later attached itself to him. Yeah,
and he said he was struggling to complete it. Right? He never, and then allegedly, I'm going to ask you, he did finally complete the conjuring one time and said that he would never do it again.
Well, as far as I know, you shouldn't have to do it again if you've done it once. But that was, I'm not sure, the whole crossing, there are all of these different of tests which come up. It's one of those things that in this concept of sort of occult spiritual advancement, where you have to encounter different beings, it's kind of like it's almost like Stations of the Cross, if you'll let you have to go through these different experiences. One of them, I'm not sure this is crossing the abyss, where it's together. There are all sorts of terms for this. The midnight of the soul, the kind of ultimate. You have to. Not exactly the same. You have to reach bottom before you can come up. Before you can find the light, you have to have all the light taken away. There are these series of tests. Now, in some ways, these were tests I think he sort of created for himself. In other ones, there were ones that were all part of occult lore that in terms of an aspiring magician needed to be. But the single greatest contribution that Aleister Crowley made to occultism, made to everything which today might arguably be called New Age, was his definition of magic. And magic is a system of things, basically of actions and procedures that open up a larger world that surrounds our own. That's one of the things I think we could all pretty much agree on, is that there's a lot more stuff around us that we can't see and we can't hear. We can see colors our dogs can't. They can hear sounds we can't. Which means that it's an interesting thing. Even though your pet is living right beside you, they're living in a completely different reality. It's not the same world. It's a parallel universe. And I mean that literally. Time moves differently for them. Colors act differently. So next time you look into the eyes of your dog and the cat, remember they're living in a parallel new universe, which is 6 inches from your face. But that is really what's going on. So there's a whole Crowley's contribution was his definition of magic was the idea, as he said, that magic is the art and science of causing conformity or causing change to occur in conformity with will, which I would basically paraphrase as saying that what it is, it's the ability to use willpower or concentration intent to alter reality, to change things, maybe to change the outcome of something. Somebody once called it tilting the luck plane. You know, you just tilting the table a little bit so the marble's going to roll a little bit more in that direction. And you only have to do it very, very slightly. I mean, that's a good way to think about it. You got a table and you got a marble sitting on it. To get the marble to roll off the table, you don't have to tilt it like that. All it requires is just the tiniest difference from one side to the other, and gravity will do its work. The marble will roll in the direction that you want. And if you can continue to sort of change the level of that table just the tiniest amount, you can make that marble move around the table in a way that you want to. So this is a kind of, metaphor for what means controlling reality is through the application of intent or will. Now, that's one of those ideas that Crowley didn't invent. I think he gave a good description of it. And the other thing, if you look around, you'll notice how many people do that. You ever heard people talk about affirmations, positive affirmations? I'm going to make positive. Well, that's magic when you're doing that. So yes, my friends, if you were making positive, if you were visualizing, if you were trying to manifest things in your life, you are trying to cause change to conform to will. You are practicing magic even if you didn't know that. And that's what I think.
It could be. In the time that we have left, hold on. I want to stay right there because check this out. I covered this today, earlier today on the news. And now I am I'm going to keep this very, very brief. But a recent experiment now suggests that the brain is not too warm or wet for consciousness to exist as a quantum wave that connects with the rest of the universe. Now, this comes out of some experiments, but Timothy Palmer, PhD, mathematical physicist at Oxford, who specializes in chaos and climate. He wrote this paper. It was just released and published today. He believes the laws of physics must be fundamentally geometric, like the best way to explain that, like a Fibonacci sequence, right? It's geometric, and that we are on a line like a car on a freeway, and that other universes and consciousness exist and are passing us on the freeway. And so when we have intuition, manifestation, the thought of free will, it is because we are touching consciousness in another part of the universe, and that it exists all around us as a location. He doesn't define what consciousness is, but he knows where it stays. And it's so when we look at and we talk about manifestations or this thought process, suddenly science is now pursuing this where consciousness was always taboo. And the reason why I'm bringing all of this up is because you brought up manifestation, but we're discussing Crowley. And when we look at the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, of which he was a member of, an alchemical and hermetic society with the secrets of the world and everything else, Crowley became a part of that. But the three founders of Golden Dawn were all Freemasons.
And Rosicrucians.
Yeah. And you look at all, and it's just like the more that you dig, the more that you see that everything in a strange way is like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? Everything is connected.
It's all connected. Well, here's the way it generally worked in the 19th century. You had people who became regular Freemasons. Then they became what we would call esoteric Freemasons. That is, they became more. See, there's lots of directions you can go. And you can basically go 1, 2, 3. You can take the 3 blue degrees of Freemasonry, which is where 99% of people stop. And it can be all about fellowship and good times and self-improvement. And it has to be no more than that. No more. Or you can get Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma, and you can study the esoteric meanings of the higher degrees of the Scottish Rite, and you can acquire those. And if that's not enough for you, you can get into the Egyptian Rite, and yeah, that goes all the way up to 99. You can earn all of these different merit badges, and you can take this as seriously or as non-seriously as you want to. But there is this whole greater realm. I mean, one of the things that Freemasonry at the higher orders expands into, one of the things it morphs into, is occultism, the study of secret ideas and doctrines. And that's, most people never go there, but you can go there. It is a road which will take you there if you want to keep following it through the higher degrees. So what happened is that people got into regular Freemasonry. From there, they went into higher grade esoteric Freemasonry. Then they became Rosicrucians. So to become part of the English Rosicrucian Society in the 19th century, you had to be a Master Mason. Okay, you had to get that far. But then, once you've all become Rosicrucians, well, what's next? Well, there'll be another order, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and that will only be chosen. See how this works? All these people become Freemasons. Some become esoteric Freemasons. Some of those become Rosicrucians, and then some of those split off and form their own order. It's like nesting dolls, and this is one of the ways you have to imagine secret societies. Inside one is another, and inside that is another, and inside that is another, and this process never ends. They're constantly reforming and recreating themselves. And
is that what attracted Crowley? I can't let this escape.
Okay.
So Crowley summons and channels a being called Lamb. And his drawing of Lamb, I would argue, is today's pop culture widely accepted alien gray. The image of Lamb is, you look at Lamb. Yeah. Lamb is a gray.
Well, it looks kind of like one to the extent we know what grays look like. I mean, you got to think about it. Since we've never actually seen one, a real one in physical form, they're all imaginary. The only thing we have are images of them. We don't actually have one of those. I mean, it's not like a gorilla. You can say, okay, here's a gorilla in the zoo. This is what a gorilla looks like. And therefore, all gorillas look like that. The gray is, in a modern sense, a mythical being. I mean, I'm not arguing that they don't exist, but the point is nobody can actually show you one. There are just these different kinds of descriptions. So the Lamb drawing does look very much like what people imagine so-called gray aliens to look like. Although I was once told by an artist friend, I showed this to a person who was an artist, and they looked at it and they go, well, that's not a big head. That's just perspective. That's just this figure leaning forward towards you. And I never thought about that before. And I don't know whether that's that explanation or not, but ever since I was told that, I don't see it in the same way. I'm not really sure what am I looking at. Am I looking, is this the regular head, or is this the sort of perspective that I'm looking at? And I think that brings us back to the point in so much of this stuff is that you see something right in front of you, but you don't know what you're looking at. I don't know. That's kind of a general description of life in a lot of ways. We spend our time looking at so many things. You know, we meet someone and we think we're in love with them, or they think that they're in love with us, and we imagine them in all sorts of ways. And then at some point you realize that, no, that was just sort of your imagination, or that was the way that you thought about this person, which isn't necessarily any of that sound familiar. Okay. Anybody ever been in that position where you thought you knew this person and then you found out that no, actually you don't. You never understood what it was you were looking at the whole time it was there in front of you, even though you were married to it for a certain amount of time. I'm not
Well, when
talking.
you, yeah, for sure, for sure. When you have so many different experiencers out there, not to jump into ufology or what is going on, but the descriptions that have of contact, and that includes Steven Spielberg, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, for example. These people have most of them have no idea who Lamb is, have never seen the image, probably know nothing about Aleister Crowley, but yet their description of their contact is exactly what Crowley drew. And that I find interesting. I don't think there's some deep-rooted psychosis that everybody is schizophrenic and seeing the same thing. And I don't think that's the case.
Well,
I do find it beyond coincidence.
Mass hysteria or mass psychosis is an overworked term. Because anytime somebody generally goes, well, this is just mass hysteria, it really means you don't have an answer for it. Because the problem for that to me is you can't tell me what mass hysteria is. I mean, how exactly does that work? That's what I want to know. I want to know that if something is mass hysteria, what is the precise physical organ? I mean, something would happen. There should be some sort of process that should be definable.
Right,
and
right.
really is.
Yeah, so I've pulled up Lamb here, and you know what? It also reminds me of Star Trek, the original series, right? There's that too as well. And did Gene Roddenberry have any idea who Lamb was? Or go back to some of the original Twilight Zone stuff. Remember To Serve Man and some of those. Did they have any idea who Crowley was or who Lamb was? But yet this is what Crowley drew. Crowley. And I think this was 1920,
1919, I think.
1919.
1918
Right.
or 1919, yeah.
Yeah, that's a long time ago, man.
Yes, he's even got a cloak on. Well, I don't know. I mean, this is the image that he drew. Remember, this is the sort of fact of the case. Crowley drew this. Nobody argues that he didn't. I don't know whether Crowley knew exactly what he was looking at. So again, we come back to that question. What does it mean? What is it? I see it there. What is this thing that I'm looking at? Is it an alien? Is it a demon? I don't know. Is it just something that Crowley decided that he would draw?
Okay, last question, Rick. By the way, perfect show, my friend. Perfect show.
You.
I can't wait to have you back on, and we'll continue the conversation. Are reptilians running the world?
Are reptilians running the world? Well, if you rank everything on a level of probability, from very probable to barely possible, I have to rank that towards barely possible. All right.
I threw you a softball.
That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I threw you a softball. a softball. Well, it's fun to talk about.
Yeah.
It's fun to talk about. I've got to watch the computer algorithms here. I've been messed with a lot, but I've had David Icke. I'm friends with David Icke, and I've had him on the show many times. And I went and saw him speak here in the United States, and he gave me seats in the front and center for 8 hours, 8 or 10 hours. And because I was sitting in the center, in the front row of tickets that he gave me, I'm sitting in the middle. I can't leave. He can't look down and see an empty chair, right? So I'm stuck. I gotta do the whole thing, man. I gotta ride this thing out. Anyway, 10 hours, man. We broke for lunch. We did an hour for lunch. He never mentioned reptilians once. He never went there. He didn't go into any of the weird stuff. He's tried to in interviews, but I'm not. It's just weird. I don't know where this side of not only him but just reptilians running the world in general originated from. I don't know that, but it's certainly people love a good conspiracy, and that thing took off.
Because we're afraid of snakes. I think that's it.
Well, that has a lot to do with it, for sure.
I think that has something to do with it. People are hinky about snakes, and so the idea that snake people are around. Well, the other thing about
lizards, alligators, crocodiles, man, we can go on and on with that. They're all scary.
The press picked up on it. Is what happened. Is that Ike said all kinds of things, and some reporter heard him say lizard people. Okay, well then they're all over that. They're all over the lizard people, and then they promote that idea. Probably, in all fairness, out of any proportion that ever had anything to do with what David Icke was saying.
Right, true. And here's the crazy part. I mean, here's the nutty crazy part. The oldest story in the book, right? The flying saucer lands on the White House lawn, right? Okay, here we go. Stairs come down, dude steps out, and it's a reptilian dude in a cloak. It goes, with a forked tongue, it comes out, and we've been running Earth for 1 million years. What? Ike was right. That's the thing. Oh, by the way, Lamb, who I had up here, also reminded me of Mars attacks.
Yes, also Invasion of the Saucer Men from around 1955. It's an
Same
old,
thing.
cheapo sci-fi. But that to me is one of the first places that big-headed aliens showed up. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. Rick, perfect show. Where can everybody follow your stuff and get your books?
Well, my books you can find on Amazon or any other source that sells books. You can look for them there. I am working on having a podcast of my own. I don't know, because apparently we need one more of those. The term for that is strange as it seems, and hopefully some of those episodes will be out on YouTube or elsewhere in the near future. And there we go.
Yeah, I've seen. So Rick has got the channel set up. I've got the link for it.
Yeah,
there's nothing on it yet. Yeah, no content yet, but the link for it is below. And when you post your first, let me know, and we'll get it out there for you.
Okay. And I have to add that the series that I've done for the Great Courses, Real History of Secret Societies, Crimes of the Century, and Secrets of the Occult, just in case you're ready, where every episode mentions Aleister Crowley, because he's just kind of that guy. You can look for those at the Great Courses.
Yeah, and I'm just going to let you know, and everybody, in the interest of transparency, I went through all of those. I'm a member of the Great Courses, and I do that stuff all. I'm addicted to it, man. I'm addicted. I'm in the middle of right now. What's the one I'm doing now? I'm doing the history of ancient humans, which goes back before written history, right? And I'm 30, I'm like 15 courses in on this one. But yeah, the Great Courses, that's my what's the word, that's my secret addiction, my private thing that I just keep in the background. I don't really advertise, but I can't get enough of that. I just cannot get enough of the Great Courses. So thank you so much, and I'll speak to you soon. And
well, thanks for having me on. It has been a blast.
Thank you, Rick. Behave and be well.
All right, bye-bye.
Rick Spence, everybody. That was a perfect night on the show. And yeah, he's right, though. The Great Courses. I've been through all three of his. Head over to the Great Courses and check Rick out there. And with that, what am I doing tomorrow night on the show? Tomorrow night, oh yeah, Rick Leskowitz is with us tomorrow night. We're going to be talking about the mystery of life energy. So with that, I'll see everybody tomorrow night, but for now, all I've got is Go Back Lee Tappy. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Special thanks to Bill, John, Dex, Jessica, Dennis, and Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music by Doug Aldrich. Intro, Space Boy. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Go back, Lee Tappy.